3 years ago, I had never even heard of a Gantt chart. Today, I manage development projects worth millions of dollars. So when people ask me about my project management training or what to do with no experience, the story that I'm about to tell you proves that there's another way to break into this field. Greetings, good day, and welcome. For those of you who are new here, I'm Deanna. On this channel, we talk about all things project management, nonprofit management, grants, and development. And today, I'm making this video for you guys. A quick shout out to Nikita Donaldson 6861 for this original question, and to Jemiah Maya 602 for the follow-up. So hold on, y'all. Before we get started, I'm gonna need to make myself a triple shot latte. So let me go get that started so I can really break down for you guys how I went from zero project management experience to where I'm at now. Hold on, BRB. Because this path I took, it wasn't planned, it wasn't traditional, and it definitely wasn't expensive. But it worked better than any formal training could have for my specific situation. All right, let's get started.
Now, get out your pencils and paper and write down the assignment.
First and foremost, we're gonna do a reality check and talk about my starting point. As always, I'm gonna keep it 100 with y'all and be completely honest on how I got started. I went to Temple University, got my BA in political science and criminal justice because I thought I was gonna be a lawyer. I had always been interested in law, particularly criminal law, from a young age. Even throughout high school, I was the student that was keeping up with politics, current events, and even some of my classes were tailored to politics. For example, my senior year of high school, one of my classes that I chose willingly was international law, and for my final project, I had to write a 25-page paper about Japan's political economy at that time. Why would I do that to myself? But I did enjoyed it. Crazy. So now fast forward to 2015, graduated from Temple, and I started to study for my LSATs. Additionally, I started attending different events and programs where lawyers and judges allowed you to shadow their work and see what their everyday looks like. And as I started to learn more and more and more, I came to realize maybe I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. So now what? Now fast forward to 2018, grant writing was suggested to me. Though I've previously heard about grant writing, I had no idea what it was. So I took the time to do some digging and I liked what I was finding. And now fast forward 7 years later, here I am as a grants and nonprofit project manager. Now through my... You wanna say hi, mama? Hi, baby. Okay, I'm gonna get back to recording, okay? As I was saying, people assume that I had a business or management background because of my analytical skills, specifically through my major. I mean, I'm learning about the ins and outs of domestic and foreign policies, systems, branches, legislation. So yeah, I could see why people would make that assumption. However, because project management was not something that I was thinking about in college, I never looked at my major to be something that could be incorporated into project management, or even looked at any majors particularly tailored to project management. Fortunately, later on, I discovered that my unused major could actually be put to good use. Because at the time, since I wasn't a lawyer or a political scientist, my poli-sci major just looked cute on my resume. Just like a majority of college students, I had an on-campus job, and my on-campus job was at a coffee shop. Prior to me working at this coffee shop though, I started working as a barista at 16 years old at Starbucks in New York City on 34th Street and Penn Station. It was a very unique experience, to say the least. In total, I think I spent about 9 years working in coffee shops. Then I spent about 5 years freelancing as a writer and editor. Now, in my little coffee shop role, surprisingly, I built up a number of skills. First was inventory management, because if we didn't have the right milks, creamers, syrups, cups, lids, we might as well not even have have open shop for the day. Second was people and risk management. I had spent my early years as a barista, but eventually I was promoted to shift manager, which means I had a little bit more responsibility under my belt. I was helping resolve work conflicts. I was helping our store manager arrange everybody's schedule because we are all students. So sometimes classes conflicted. Sometimes people had to last minute switch shifts. So it was on us to figure those things out. And while in New York and on Temple's campus, I had a varying degree of customers that I interacted with on a daily basis. Some of them were super pleasant, like the best people you could possibly imagine. And then others were
be nice. I'm finding it
different, real different. Third, I did a lot of time management, like I mentioned, about schedules, changing them last minute, but also arranging meetings with the leadership team, like the other shift managers, store manager, and the assistant manager, but then also having store-wide meetings as well. And lastly, processes and procedures. Like, for example, there were an infinite number of drink recipes that I had to memorize. But on top of that, I also had to train people. So if I wasn't learning the processes and procedures adequately, they ain't know it either. While I was working at coffee shops, I also began freelancing. In case you haven't heard me mention this before, writing is my first love. My mother knew this from a very young age, and she went out of her way to make sure that I was able to grow this love. Mommy, when you watch this, thank you, because if it wasn't for you seeing and uplifting my gift, I literally wouldn't be where I'm at today. Thank you, Mommy. While freelancing, I worked at various publications and wrote about various topics: health and wellness, politics, foods, recipes, blogs, poems, interviews. There was even at one point where I was like, look, I could literally write anything, because I was writing every and anything. Now, because I was working in multiple different spaces, that means all of them had different deadlines, and I had to create a system that allowed me to maintain balance. Before I knew about any project management system, database software, I had a notebook, a pen, and my Google Calendar. And when I stop and think about it, I'm like, I was practicing project management without even knowing it. But when I say zero project management experience, I mean that I never held the title, that I was never trained in any of those methodologies. And like I said, I ain't never heard of no Gantt chart, Kanban chart, none of that. I'm probably not even saying it right, but it don't matter. Y'all know what I mean. When I look at some of the project management job descriptions now, they are pretty intimidating, to say the least. All the terminology that they want you to know, the impossible number of years of experiences that they want you to have, that you're supposed to be expert level in all the different like softwares and like, I need everybody to just slow down and grab the wall. Even when I really sit back and think about when I began transitioning in my roles, I overlooked a lot of PM positions because I thought I needed the exact title in training. I thought that if I never had the title, I could never have the role. However, I then started to look at my background differently. Though I didn't have the title, what I did have was several grant writing courses from Temple University, and I had grown from a development fellow to a manager of grants and development in just 2 years. I officially really began learning about grant writing, and because there's so much technical writing in grant writing, it was impossible not to invest in some sort of courses so that I could learn more. After taking those courses at Temple University, again, my mommy introduced me to Joy Lindsay, aka the CEO and founder of Butterfly Dreams. Initially interacting with her because I was a Novus grant writer and I still didn't know what I was doing, I came to her as a volunteer and she looked me in my eyes and said, absolutely not. So I started working with Joy just 10 hours a week, $20 an hour, and I was building myself as a grant writer. I transitioned from being her novice grant writer to her development manager. Then, fast forward to September 2019, Joy connected with this organization called the Newark Opportunity Youth Network. She herself was starting as their chief of staff and thought it would be vital for them and me to bring me on as a development fellow. Fellow because, again, I was still a novice and there was still so much for me to learn as someone working in development, but also working in development in a new space. Then, July 2020, I was officially hired as the manager of grants and development for the Newark Opportunity Youth Network. Worked with them full-time for 2 years and then transitioned into the grants and development consultant role that I have with them now. I showed you guys what my progression was, but what exactly got me promoted? First and foremost, I was asking questions. What were the things that already existed and what gaps needed to be filled? Second, I really displayed my innovation and creativity. I was the first one to implement social media campaigns and to really build their individual giving and donations. Third was systems building and maintenance. Though Butterfly Dreams and NOYN were receiving grants, there was no streamlined processes, no exact procedures. They did not have a project management software set up or a CRM system that was dedicated to the individual donors that were coming in. So I built that.
I built this shit! Me! Brick by brick!
And lastly, I had results with the receipts to go with them. Over the years, I've received multi-year 6- and 7-figure grants for the organizations, in addition to creating a 25% increase of their individual donors. So all in all, your girl's been working pretty hard. So if no formal training, what actually prepared me? Turns out it was 3 things that I didn't even realize were building my project management skills. First, my political science major built my critical thinking, problem solving, and multi-perspective analysis. When studying for my political science degree, I was analyzing complex systems and understanding stakeholder perspective. Now, I know everybody watching won't be a poli-sci major, but shout outs to the ones that are. And if you made it to this point in the video, let me know in the comments what your major was or is, and if it has anything to do with your line of work, or it just looks cute on your resume and LinkedIn like me. But regardless of what major you had or have, I'm pretty sure you've worked on something or will be working on something called a capstone project. By definition, a capstone project is a final comprehensive academic assignment, often a research paper or a practical project that allows students to synthesize and apply knowledge from their entire degree program to a real-world problem. Now, when I was doing some further digging and connecting capstone projects to project management, this is where Google popped up. College capstone projects help develop practical skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, research, communication, as well as project management skills like planning, organizing, and self-direction. That's just one example, but you should be able to see that every major has transferable skills if you look for those connections. Second, freelancing taught me client management, how to juggle multiple deadlines, and maintaining quality control under pressure. When I was freelancing, one of the roles that I ended up having was a lead interviewer. I had to map out timelines of execution for the interviews, which meant I had to schedule time with the interviewee, make time to write the interview questions, conduct the interview, transcribe it, put all of that and make it into an article, submit it for review, go through any revisions or drafts that needed to be made, and boom, it was finally done. Then for a different publication, I spent time as a junior blog writer. For this role, I had to take time to really brainstorm various topics, to submit those topics for approval, to then when they finally got approved, I was doing further research so I could collect data and evidence for the topics that were approved. Went through various drafts and revisions until we got to a final product. These were 2 completely different spaces. Consistently, they had conflicting deadlines, and it was up to me to figure out how to manage both effectively and efficiently. Third, that I had to learn, grant writing is project management in disguise. Every single proposal that I work on in itself is a project. Every report that I submit is some sort of evaluation. And every deadline that I need to hit is a milestone. Now, just to show y'all a quick example as to what this proposal project process looks like, I have something that I created called a golden proposal, where I literally have every single category that you could possibly think of when it comes to what will be in a grant proposal application, regardless of the funder. Yes, they do ask for all of this and more regularly. So because there's so many different elements, I have to make sure to map out each proposal like it is a project. And typically there are a few phases. The first phase is the proposal writing, putting everything together and filling out this golden proposal. Then we're jumping into the research phase. This is me identifying appropriate funders, understanding what the funders' requirements are, and to do a competitive analysis to weigh whether or not it's even worth submitting an application. Next is stakeholder relationships, because just because you got the funds, that don't mean that your work stops there. At this phase, I'm really working on cultivating and building those relationships. And that's usually a mix of things like monthly check-ins, progress reports, impact reports, and social media presence, just so that our funders are consistently seeing where their money is going. Next is definitely team coordination. In this phase, I'm typically working with the program team, finance team, our leadership, and board members in order to complete all the different proposal parts. Though I am the leader of this project, that does not mean that I have all the information that I need to get the project done. You feel me? Overall though, all these different phases have high stake deadlines. Each and every step in a grant project process is very intentional, and if anything is missed or overlooked, very, very, very detrimental, to say the least. So by the time this project manager position was presented to me, I was really able to take a step back and see that I had been doing that for years. When it came to fully understanding what it meant to be a project manager, I took the learning while doing approach. Of course, I had the foundational skills or I would not have been hired for the role, but being a project manager in title, that's a little bit different. I was a good communicator. I was a great leader in any project or task that was put on me. And naturally, I have been an organizer my whole life. So again, I had the foundational skills. But when it came to the job performance, like KPIs or strategic alignment, that was new to me. And with this being new, not just to myself, but for the organization that I was working for, I had to create systems from scratch and not follow any textbook examples, because what was in the books wasn't helpful. So now let's discuss practical application rather than theory. During this transition, I learned something key about myself. I learned better by doing and adjusting rather than studying theory first. Now, usually for my type A personality, I tend to study extensively before I start anything. But what I was soon discovering is that studying too much and being a little too analytical was paralyzing me. If we're being honest, I thought that I needed to be perfect. But what really pushed me into really growing my skill set and becoming a stronger and better project manager, I was faced with real consequences that made learning urgent and also memorable. Because if you are forced into a situation, you don't have no choice but to learn how to figure it out as soon as possible and remember what you did, so if you come across that problem in the future, you know how to tackle it. For example, I started a Giving Tuesday social media campaign for NOIM. For myself, the communications manager, and the organization as a whole, a social media campaign was completely new. But instead of getting too wrapped up in the extensive studying, I just executed and figured it out as I went along. I broke this campaign down into 5 key components: research, content creation, scheduling, monitoring, and analysis. For the research phase, I was looking at what other organizations were doing that they were having successful campaigns, and on the contrary, what should we avoid so that our campaign doesn't turn sour. For content creation, I had to ask what content was I currently working with, like what videos, photos, etc. did we already have, and if there were any gaps, what sort of content did we have to produce. For scheduling, myself and the communications manager had to sit and really think about what time and day would it be best to reach out and connect with our audiences, depending upon the platform, because we had individuals that were on our Instagram pages and Facebook, but there were also individuals that we had only via email. So it was balancing those 2 or 3 different platforms. Once the campaign was out and active, component 4 is monitoring. We took the time to see how well each of our platforms were actually doing. In addition to tracking progress and seeing what platforms would be best utilized for us to continue sharing on and which ones were just not hitting. And lastly, for analysis, we looked at what content was really being engaged with much more and was standing out, how we can overall improve our engagement, what are the things that we were missing, and after its completion, what do the KPIs tell us about the success or the improvements needed to be made to the campaign. Regardless if it's a social media campaign or a new proposal that I'm working on, every project has taught me something new. I had to create templates from scratch. I had to build workflows for myself and the organization. And I had to figure out reporting structures that made sense for all of us. Now, I want us to touch upon why this approach actually works. There are a lot of advantages to learning while doing that a lot of people don't really talk about. First, you develop solutions for your environment instead of forcing generic frameworks. For example, agile method sounds really good in theory, but when you are doing things like working with community partners who need 3 to 4 weeks to get their board's approval on something, those 2-week sprints ain't happening. It's not happening. I'm just saying. In order to best handle those situations for when they do pop up, I had to create a stakeholder check-in system that accounts for the fact that nonprofit board members also have full-time jobs. So maybe they can only meet on the weekends, or maybe they can only meet after 6 p.m. Regardless, this check-in was able to keep myself, my organization, and our board aligned. One band, one sound.
One band, one sound.
I'm not gonna lie, nonprofit work really requires like MacGyver project management and maneuvering. And there's literally no textbook that exists that will teach you how to manage that. You just have to do it in real time. Second, you build real confidence because every challenge that you solve is actually your work. There's a big difference between knowing what stakeholder management looks like defined on paper and actually navigating a board meeting where 3 different people think that they are the head of your project. There have been instances where a funder has changed the requirements mid-grant, so I literally had to redesign an evaluation and reporting system in 2 weeks to abide by that change. I couldn't just Google a solution, I just had to make one of my own. When you actually have those wins under your belt, you can't argue with the results that you created yourself. And third, you develop your own authentic leadership style. Most PM training teaches you to be authoritative, schedule-driven, and process-focused. But what if your natural style, like me, is more collaborative? In the line of work that I do, I discovered that I am really good at getting people excited about the work that I do because I am connecting them to it. I take the time to make sure that I am connecting the work that we do to their personal values. I also use a lot of storytelling in my project communication. Now, traditional project managers will tend to stick to data and timelines, but I found that people tend to engage more when they understand the human impact of the work. When you're authentically yourself as a project manager, naturally, people will trust you more. They can tell the difference between when you're just following a script versus when you are genuinely invested in the project's success. All right, so I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. Before I could get through the rest of this video, I needed to eat expeditiously. And I needed to be comfortable because I just finished eating some curry goat, rice and peas, and cabbage, and sitting up in a desk chair just Now that I'm fed and hydrated, we can talk about how you can replicate this approach. If you've watched any of my other videos about project management and how to break into the field with no experience, then you've probably heard me talk about some of these key points before, but let's walk through this roadmap. The first thing that I'm gonna need you to do is a deep skill inventory. When you are reviewing your background, updating your resume, looking through your LinkedIn profile, I want you to look for verbs like coordinated, managed, planned, organized, facilitated, tracked, and reported. Sorry, y'all, I need a sip of water real bad. Also, I want you to make sure that you are taking a look at those experiences and roles that you would think, they got nothing to do with project management. You'd actually be surprised. For example, if you are somebody that has worked in customer service, that means that you have experience in stakeholder management. If you are a teacher and you are building curriculums and managing your classroom, that means that you are illustrating that you are capable of breaking down complex ideas into digestible pieces. And even outside of profession, if you are a parent, a guardian, a dog mom, a dog dad, that means that you have a lot of experience with resource allocation and time management. With all of that information and doing a deeper dive of your skill set, I then want you to take that and reframe it into project management language. Instead of you saying help customers, I want you to say manage client relationships. Instead of saying that you planned events, I want you to say that you coordinated multiple stakeholder projects. This is not you inflating or lying about the work that you're doing. We not liars over here. If there's anything I'm gonna do, I'm gonna keep it 100 with y'all. But what you are taking the time to do is describe project management aspects in the work that you've already been doing. Now that you've reframed your experience into project management language, we're now going to find opportunities to formalize coordination work. Basically, you are being diligent about addressing any problems in the spaces that you work in, whether that be volunteering, whether that be an event in your community, or you notice something at work and you're like, hey boss, so I saw that this process was whack and I thought that I could make the process better. I mean, don't say it like that, but you know what I mean. A better way to say it would be, I noticed coordination challenges with X. Can I streamline this process? I basically said that though. But with all of that, you are building a portfolio that shows that you are able to manage and coordinate projects in order to lead them to completion and success. Now, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this one before, but the last step that I'm gonna need you to take is to find a mentor and do some homework. When you find somebody that you would like to be your mentor, please don't just go to them and say, will you be my mentor? That's crazy, especially if they don't know you. And overall, being somebody's mentor is like a huge deal and a really big commitment. Instead, I want you to ask for a very specific conversation. You could say something like, I'm transitioning into project management and would love 15 minutes of your time to get your perspective on the field. Start small and then build out the relationship. And when I say do your homework, I mean I want you to study the project management practices of the industry that you want to enter into. A healthcare project manager is not going to do the same things as a tech project manager, who is not going to do the same things as a nonprofit manager. There will be similarities, but you should focus on the field that you want to get into, or find somebody that is able to translate amongst many fields. As I said, I do have several videos that talk about how you can break into project management without any experience, how you can land a job without any experience, or you can get an internship without any experience. So take some time to check those out as well. So all in all, to answer the original question, no, I do not have any formal training, but I have been accidentally training myself for years. When people ask me about my project management training, I hope that my answer challenges the assumption that there's only one path into the field. I built my skills through experience, and that experience is just as valid as any certification. But there are multiple paths into project management. Formal training works for some people. On-the-job learning and being more hands-on works for others. And there are many successful project managers who combine both approaches. The skills that you need for project management, you can develop them in almost any role. Communication, organization, problem solving, relationship management, all of these are human skills that you develop through your life experiences and not just something that you learn in a classroom. But they're not the only way that you can manage projects successfully. Oop, would you look at that? You made it to the end of this video, so thanks for watching.
Sometimes goodbyes are a bitch.
T-shirt idea. Goodbye stink.
If you don't feel like you have the right background, I'm gonna need you to take another look at what you've been doing. You really might be much more ready than you think. Start with giving yourself more credit for the complexity of the work that you're currently doing. If you're sitting there thinking you don't have enough experience or that you're not qualified, I want you to challenge that thought. Look at the things that you've actually accomplished, not just the titles that you've held. Your experience has value even if it looks different from the traditional path. Nikita, Jemima, and everyone else looking into project management, whether you're just starting, trying to make a transition, or trying to grow, I want you to always remember that your unique background is an asset, not a limitation. This field, regardless of the industry, needs people with diverse experiences and perspectives. Your path might be exactly what the industry needs. As I always say, a lot of my videos are inspired by you guys, so if anybody has any questions or topics that you would like me to dive deeper into, make sure to drop all of that in the comments below. Also, I want you to tell me, what skills do you already have that you think you could apply to project management? Comment what you think, talk to me. I love hearing from you guys. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, bye y'all.